There's a photograph from October 1929. You've probably seen it. Men in suits and hats standing outside the New York Stock Exchange, faces blank with shock, some staring at nothing, some weeping openly in the street. The image is so famous it's become wallpaper. There's background noise in a history class, a meme, a visual cliche for crash. But if you look closely, if you really study their faces, you'll see something that should terrify you. Because those men aren't looking at a ticker. They're not staring at numbers on a board. They're looking at each other, searching each other's eyes for the same thing, confirmation that what they're feeling is real, that the ground beneath them actually disappeared, that the thing everyone said was impossible just happened. That's the part the photograph can't show you. The crash didn't start on Wall Street. It started in the space between people. It started when someone blinked first, when someone stopped believing, when confidence, that invisible architecture that holds the entire system up, just vanished. One moment it was there, the next gone, and once it left the room, no amount of money, no government promise, no expert reassurance could bring it back. Here's what nobody tells you about 1929. The crash wasn't the disease. It was the symptom. The real collapse happened in slow motion over the years before, while everyone was celebrating. While the headlines screamed about a new era of permanent prosperity, while ordinary people mortgaged their futures to buy stocks they didn't understand, because not doing so felt like being left behind, while the system built itself higher and higher on a foundation of borrowed money and borrowed time. And here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. We're watching the same show. Different costumes, different props, same script. The ghost of 1929 is back, and this time it learned new tricks. Let's start with what they were saying then. Open any newspaper from 1928 or early 1929 and you'll see headlines that could have been written yesterday. Stock prices have reached a permanently high plateau. The economy has entered a new era of endless growth. Modern financial tools have eliminated the risk of panics. The language changes across a century, but the delusion stays the same. Every generation convinces itself that this time is different, that the old rules don't apply anymore, that we've evolved past the cycles that destroyed our grandparents. In the 1920s, the new technology was radio, automobiles, electricity, modern miracles that seemed to promise infinite economic expansion. Today, it's artificial intelligence, cloud computing, crypto, different machines, same hypnosis, the belief that innovation makes old risks obsolete, that the future can't fail because the future is always better. Back then, they called it buying on margin. You could control $1,000 worth of stock with just $100 down. The other $900? Borrowed. And as long as prices kept rising, the math worked beautifully. You'd sell at a profit, pay back the loan, pocket the difference. Free money. A money printing machine available to anyone brave enough to pull the lever. Shoeshine boys gave stock tips, taxi drivers talked positions. Everyone was in the market because being out of the market felt like being a fool. Today, we don't call it margin, we call it leverage. 0% financing. Buy now, pay later. Cash out refinancing. Margin calls became margin apps. The technology changed. The trap stayed the same. You can control a $500,000 house with 3% down. You can buy stocks with a swipe. You can gamble on options you don't understand with money you don't have, all from your phone, in bed, at 3 in the morning, while the rest of the world sleeps. The system makes it easy, frictionless, because friction is the enemy of a bubble. Friction is when someone stops and thinks. When someone asks, wait, how does this actually work? Bubbles die the moment people start asking questions. So the system removes the questions, makes it smooth, makes it feel normal, makes doubt feel like cowardice. And just like the 1920s, we've built an entire vocabulary designed to make reckless sound responsible. Back then, they called highly leveraged speculation participating in American prosperity. Today, we call it building wealth or getting your money working for you. The words are different. The con is identical. Borrowing from the future and calling it investing. Gambling and calling it strategy. Praying the music doesn't stop and calling it planning. But here's the mechanism underneath all the noise, underneath all the new era narratives and technological miracles. Bubbles are built on credit, not wealth, not value. Credit. The belief that tomorrow's money will pay for today's bet, and credit has a special property that makes it more dangerous than dynamite. It multiplies everything. When confidence is high, credit expands and makes everyone feel richer. But when confidence cracks, credit contracts and makes everyone poorer at the same exact speed, only in reverse and faster. Imagine a crowded theater. Everyone's watching the show, enjoying themselves. Then someone smells smoke. Just one person. They don't panic. They just stand up and start walking toward the exit. Calmly, quietly. But then someone else notices them leaving. And they think, why are they leaving? Do they know something I don't? So they stand up too. Now 2 people are walking toward the exit, then 5, then 20. And suddenly everyone realizes at the exact same moment, the room is on fire and there's only one door. That's a credit contraction. That's what happened in 1929. And it's what's waiting in the wings right now, dressed in modern clothes, pretending to be someone new. Because the thing that makes bubbles lethal isn't the expansion. It's what happens when the credit stops flowing. When lenders blink first. In the 1920s, it started when margin lenders began asking their borrowers to put up more cash. Just a little more, just to be safe. Reasonable, right? Prudent. But when you've borrowed 90% of your position and the lender asks for another 10% cash and you don't have it, you have exactly one option: sell. And when everyone has to sell at the same time, there are no buyers. Prices don't drift down, they collapse. And the collapse makes the lenders more nervous, so they demand even more cash from even more borrowers, which forces even more selling, which creates even more collapse. It's a spiral, a feedback loop, a machine that feeds on itself and can't be turned off from the inside. The 1929 crash wasn't a single day. It was a cascade, a chain reaction. October 24th, Black Thursday, panic selling, temporary recovery. October 28th, Black Monday, another collapse. October 29th, Black Tuesday, the final detonation. Each wave worse than the last. Because fear spreads faster than facts, faster than government, faster statements, faster than expert reassurances. Fear is a contagion that moves at the speed of eye contact. And here's the truly horrifying part. The crash wasn't even the worst of it. The crash was just the moment the theater caught fire. The real horror was what came after. Because once the credit stops, once the lending freezes, once everyone realizes the whole structure was built on borrowed confidence, the system doesn't just pause, it inverts. Banks that seemed safe yesterday become suspects today. Did they lend too much? Are they solvent? Do they have enough cash to cover withdrawals? Nobody knows. So depositors start lining up to pull their money out, not because the bank did anything wrong, just because everyone else is lining up. And the moment a bank faces a run, it doesn't matter if it was healthy 5 minutes ago. It's dead now. Because no bank keeps enough cash to pay every depositor at once. The entire banking system is built on the assumption that not everyone will want their money at the same time. It's a trust game. And the moment trust breaks, the game ends. In 1929 and the years that followed, over 9,000 banks failed. Not because they were corrupt, not because they broke laws, because fear became self-fulfilling. Because the crowd moved as one body toward the exit and the exit was too small and people got crushed. Your grandmother's savings, your grandfather's farm, gone, not stolen, evaporated. Because they were never really there in the first place. They were promises, and promises are only as solid as the belief that holds them. Now look around. Look at what we've built since 2008, since the last time the system nearly died. Did we fix the architecture? Did we remove the leverage? Did we make the exits bigger? No. We made the bubbles larger. We made the credit cheaper. We made the leverage easier to access. We built the exact same trap, but bigger, shinier, faster, with apps. We have stock valuations that would make 1929 speculators blush. We have housing prices disconnected from incomes in ways that defy math. We have corporate debt at record levels. We have margin debt at record levels. We have everything bubbles inflated by everything credit, and the only thing holding it all up is the belief that central banks will never let it pop, that the authorities learned their lesson, that 1929 can't happen again because we're too smart now, too advanced, too modern. But here's what the ghost of 1929 learned. You don't need a crash to destroy an economy. You just need the fear of a crash. You just need lending to slow down. You just need credit to get a little more expensive, a little harder to access. You don't need Black Tuesday. You just need a slow Monday, a concerning Wednesday, a few weeks where things feel wrong, where the numbers don't make sense anymore, where the confidence starts to crack. And we're already seeing it, not in headlines, in the spaces between the headlines, in the housing market where buyers vanish when rates tick up, in the credit markets where borrowing costs rise and companies suddenly can't refinance, in the small businesses that can't get loans anymore, not because they did anything wrong, but because lenders are getting nervous, because the algorithm changed, because the risk model's updated, because someone somewhere blinked first. The snap point isn't dramatic. It's quiet, clinical, bureaucratic. A lender sends a letter, a credit line gets reduced, a loan application gets denied, and the person on the receiving end thinks it's personal. They think they did something wrong. They don't realize they're part of a wave, that the tightening is systematic, that the machine is changing modes from expansion to contraction, and there's nothing any individual can do to stop it. In 1929, the people in that photograph thought they were unique failures. They thought the market rejected them personally. Most of them never understood they were caught in a systemic unraveling, that they were fuel for a machine that converted confidence into credit and then credit back into fear. They died thinking they were bad at the game, never realizing the game was rigged from the start. And here's where the horror gets worse, because you'd think after 1929, after the Great Depression, after the breadlines and the bank runs and the suicides, you'd think the system would learn, that the authorities would say, never again. We need to build something that can't collapse like this. But that's not what happened. What happened was darker, more clever. The system learned that crashes are survivable if you're the right size, that the real threat isn't the crash itself, it's the loss of control. So instead of preventing bubbles, they built a new machine, one that could survive crashes by making the crashes someone else's problem, by making sure that when the theater catches fire, certain people get to exit through a private door, while everyone else fights over the public one. They called it too big to fail. They called it emergency liquidity. They called it stabilization. But what it really is a sorting mechanism, a system that lets the insiders survive the collapse by feeding the collapse with everyone else's futures. The bailout isn't a rescue, it's a resource transfer, a way to make sure that when the credit stops, when the lending freezes, when the confidence dies, the people at the top of the pyramid get to climb down on the backs of everyone below. After 1929, they created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Sounds protective, right? Sounds like they're helping. And for small depositors, maybe it does. Your checking account is safe up to $250,000. But what it really did was change the game. It made you trust the banking system again. It made you put your money back in. And that trust, that restored confidence became the foundation for the next bubble and the next and the next. Because here's the secret. The system doesn't want to prevent crashes. It wants to survive them. And the way you survive a crash is by having someone to feed to it. It was someone whose savings can be converted into stability, someone whose future can be burned to keep the present warm. And in 1929, they didn't have the tools to do that efficiently. Now they do. Now they've automated it, systematized it, made it bureaucratic and boring and impossible to see unless you step back far enough. The ghost of 1929 didn't die. It got a job. It went to work for the people who survived the Depression. And it learned that you don't need to crash the economy anymore. You just need to threaten to crash it. You just need to create the conditions where a crash is possible, even inevitable, and then offer to prevent it. For a price. The price is your independence, your savings, your future purchasing power. The price is converting your autonomy into their security. Every time the system teeters, every time the credit freezes, every time the bubbles start to pop, the same pattern plays out. First panic, then emergency, then intervention. And the intervention always involves transferring risk from the institutions to the public, from the insiders to the outsiders, from the people who created the bubble to the people who just wanted to live their lives. And because it's dressed in the language of rescue, because it's wrapped in the rhetoric of preventing another Great Depression, most people don't see it. They feel grateful, relieved. Thank God the authorities stepped in. Thank God they saved us. Never realizing they weren't saved, they were drafted, conscripted into paying for a crisis they didn't create, with money they haven't earned yet, through mechanisms they can't see. This is what the ghost of 1929 learned. You don't need breadlines if you can make poverty invisible. You don't need bank runs if you make withdrawals feel shameful. You don't need crashes if you can make the slow decline feel like stability. You just need to keep people busy, keep them distracted, keep them working harder to stay in the same place, and convince that their exhaustion is personal failure rather than systemic design. The Great Depression created photographs, visible suffering, lines of men waiting for work, families evicted onto the street with their furniture piled on the sidewalk. Images that couldn't be ignored, images that demanded response. But the modern version doesn't look like that. It looks like a generation that can't afford houses, like parents working 2 jobs while their kids are raised by screens, like savings accounts that never grow even when you do everything right, like the future shrinking in real time while the headlines talk about record stock markets and economic growth. It's a depression in slow motion, a collapse that takes decades instead of years, invisible to cameras, impossible to photograph. Because the suffering is individual, atomized. Each person thinks it's their fault. Their failure, never connecting the dots to see the systemic pattern. The ghost doesn't need to crash the system anymore. It just needs to hollow it out, to convert the middle class into fuel, to make sure that every crisis, every close call, every near miss gets paid for by the people who have the least say in how the system runs. And the most terrifying part, we're further into the bubble now than 1929 was at its peak. We have more leverage, more complexity, more interconnection, more ways for failure to spread, more ways for fear to metastasize. And we have the same lie they had, that modern tools make old risks obsolete, that we're too sophisticated to repeat history, that the people in charge know what they're doing, but they don't. They're just hoping the music doesn't stop on their watch, praying the bubble holds long enough for them to exit before it pops. And when it does pop, not if, when, they already have the playbook ready, the same one they used last time. And the time before that, declare emergency, invoke crisis, transfer the damage to the future, to the people who weren't in the room when the decisions got made, to the people who'll spend their lives paying for mistakes they didn't make, for parties they weren't invited to, for bubbles they were told were safe. The ghost of 1929 doesn't haunt Wall Street anymore. It lives in your rent payment, in your student loans, in your paycheck that somehow buys less every year, in your parents' retirement that doesn't cover what it was supposed to, in your kid's future that looks smaller than the one you were promised. The ghost doesn't crash anymore. It just feeds, slowly, quietly, invisibly, converting your time into their security, your future into their present, your confidence into their control. And the worst part, the part that makes this true horror, is that most people will never see it, never connect the dots, never realize that their individual struggle is part of a systemic pattern. They'll keep playing the game, keep pulling the lever, keep hoping that if they just work a little harder, save a little more, make better choices, they'll make it out. Never understanding that the game is designed to have losers, that the theater only has one exit, and that when the ghost comes to collect, it won't be holding a scythe, it'll be holding a spreadsheet. Because depressions don't just create poverty, they create permission. Permission to rewrite the rules, permission to declare emergencies, permission to do things that would have been unthinkable in normal times. And that's what's waiting in the wings. That's what comes next. Not a crash, not a collapse, something worse, something that looks like rescue but feels like a cage, something that promises safety but delivers dependence, something that turns citizens into resources and calls it salvation. The ghost of 1929 is back, and it's smiling. Because this time it won't have to work as hard. This time we'll walk into the trap ourselves, grateful for the chance.